Hi, I'm Justin Spence.
And I'm Dominic Bazil.
And welcome to PreSonus Live. Today we're talking about the CS18 and using it to control Studio One and 3. Before we get started talking about or overviewing the features and how it works and going in depth and detail, let's start simple and figure out, how do I connect this to my computer? How do I get the devices talking to each other?
Okay, so yeah, there are three ways you can connect to your computer. One's going to be via Ethernet point-to-point directly to your computer.
From the device right into my computer.
Right into your computer.
That's pretty cool.
You can connect that way. Also, if you use a router or a switch, so you can connect the CS18 to a switch and your computer to the same switch, and then they'll talk to each other that way.
So like a regular wireless router access point that I would have at my house?
Right,
Okay.
You can use that as well.
Okay.
And then also wirelessly through a router, a wireless router, you can connect the CS18 with the Wi-Fi dongle to the router, and then your computer either via Ethernet or Wi-Fi as well.
Okay, so I guess a typical situation would be I would wire it to my access point from my computer to the wireless router, and then I would connect wirelessly using the dongle from the CS18 through the air using Children's Dreams, Rainbows, and Unicorns
that's
over
correct.
to the access point, and then
that protocol. Yeah.
Okay, the Rainbows and Unicorns
Rainbows
protocol.
and unicorns.
Okay, so once I've done that, I've got my network hooked up. What magic buttons do I need to touch on the CS18 to get the two things to communicate?
Sure. Once you've made the connections, you want to go over to your CS18. You want to hit the UC Net button, which is right below the touchscreen. All right, so you hit that guy. You get a menu. So since this is a control surface that you can also use for your hardware mixer, like your RM or your AI mixers, you'll see a screen that highlights that, where you can choose your actual physical mixer.
Okay.
But also for software control, which is with Studio One, you also see a little drop-down box there.
Okay.
All right. And before it actually shows up here, you want to make sure that you have Studio One running on your computer.
So just launch Studio One on your computer, open whatever song you want to be working on, and you're rock and roll? Or?
Right. Correct.
Okay.
By default, Studio One will be configured to just pick it up automatically.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to go to software control. We're going to hit that drop-down, and we see listed here our instance of Studio One. It tells us what version we're running.
Okay.
It also tells us the IP of the computer that that version is running on.
Okay, so whatever it's hooked up and whatever that access point's telling it its IP, it knows what that is. Because of Rainbows and Unicorns, it can tell the IP address.
You could very well have multiple computers with Studio One running on them, and you could just switch out between them if you ever wanted to.
Right, we were discussing earlier, if you were on that network, I'd see your computer, so I could connect to your computer and mess up your mix, and then connect back to the studio computer and continue to do real work.
Right, very competitive mixing is what they call it.
Competitive mixing, right. Yeah. So I can connect to whatever's on the network, and that could be a piece of hardware, like an RM mixer. It could be software, which would be my computer would be on the network. So that's StudioLive CS18, whatever I want to be controlling at what time. Okay, so
we see our instance in our list. We're going to tap it to select it, give it a second, and then it gives us a confirmation on the touch screen that we're connected there.
Okay.
Also, you'll notice on the control surface itself, the main fader will go up to Unity, so we know we're connected there as well. Now all that's left to do is just hit the DAW button on CS18. We hit that, and then our mix comes alive, our faders come alive, and we're connected to Studio One, to our song.
Now I'm seeing the first 16 available channels in my mixer here in Studio One are laid out here on the first 16 faders of the CS18.
Right, so just to give an overview, by default, you're going to see your first 16 channels of your faders. So you have fader control here. You also have master fader control.
Okay.
You also have your typical select buttons, and then your solo.
Now I notice on these select buttons, they are actually following the color coding I have on my tracks. Right,
select buttons will follow basically whatever color you have selected on your channels in Studio One. This just makes it easier to navigate your mix.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
All right, so you have your solo button per track, and then you also have mute buttons per track as well.
Okay.
just above that, we have our mix buttons, and those will be used for other features we'll talk about later.
Okay.
Then also, what's pertinent is at the top we have 16 encoders. So each encoder is mapped to the pan of each channel.
Okay.
Right? So you have pan control.
So I'm selecting on that channel and I
Right.
start fidgeting with that. That's my pan control.
Right.
But in addition, it also has other functionality as well.
Right. Yeah.
Which we'll dive into a little later on down the road. But this is my fat channel section of my control surface for my RM, right?
That's correct.
And it's also a controller, or part of the encoders are different functions for control in Studio One as well.
Right. Depending on the focus that you're on in Studio One, these encoders will function either as pan or for controlling plugins, SIN levels, that sort of thing.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
So just going back to our channel strip, you'll see that each of the channel strips will show you the name of the channel that you're on. So this is going to reflect whatever name you have selected in Studio One.
The scribble strips here.
Right, the scribble strips. They're also going to give you a number of that channel, so that that relates. And then also right below that, you're going to see your automation mode, and this will change depending on whatever mode you're in.
Okay.
Then you're going to see below that your pan information.
Okay.
So whatever, however you pan it, it's going to show you, like for instance on channel 7 overhead left, you see it's pan hard left.
Okay.
And then on overhead right, it's pan hard right.
Okay.
All right. So that's the channel strips. Moving on, as an overview, we have a transport section.
Now, I have noticed that when I'm in hardware mode, transport is still functioning for Studio One. That's kind of interesting. So, like if I'm actually using my CS18 to control my hardware, transport still functions. And I'm assuming this is a function because I may actually be using Studio One in the live performance, and I might need to do, start the song or whatever.
Right, definitely.
So that's why I have transport control when I'm in hardware control mode.
Right, definitely. I mean, I can be, function for many different types of workflows.
Sure.
Maybe you're playing backing tracks or something from whatever.
Yeah. If you have just a click track, if you want to play back just a click track, or if you have like a
Right.
whole brass section that you're using to perform along with in your live performance. I'm a hardware guy. I'm gonna always go back to, hey, dude, you know what you can do with the RM? But for this instance, in transport, obviously, would be controlling Studio One, and there are multiple functions as well. So.
Right. So in your transport, you're going to have a return to zero button. You're also going to have stop, play, and then record. Then also we have modifiers so that you can get more functionality out of these
The illustrious
same buttons.
modifier.
Modifiers. So the first modifier is control.
Okay.
All right, hitting control will now make your return zero button the previous marker button, and then stop button the next marker button.
Okay, let's take a look at that. Let's see that happen. I love to see stuff happen in real life.
So let's hit play.
Okay.
And then we have some markers set up. So with control as our modifier engaged, we're going to go to the next marker by hitting stop. All right, which is our next marker. And then if we want to go to the previous marker, hit the zero button. All right, and let's stop.
I just want to make sure that folks can actually hear what it is that you're saying, because it may be hard for them to hear over all of this rock and roll happening.
Yeah.
So you're saying when control modifier is selected, return to zero and stop become previous and next marker respectively.
Correct.
Now with the other modifier, what happens?
The other modifier is the option button. So once you engage that, now these buttons, the return zero and the stop button, become rewind and fast forward respectively.
Okay, that's cool. Now, it's also screened on the transport to let you know that is a feature, and that's how that functions.
Correct.
So you just have a real quick at a glance. Hey, I need to hit this key if I want these buttons to function a little differently than what they're labeled on the button. Well, that's awesome. Tell me a little bit about our faders and stuff. What's happening there? We've got moving faders, man. I'm excited to talk about moving faders.
We have moving faders. Which comes in handy, So because of the compact size of the CS18, we obviously can't give you one-to-one for every fader in your mix. I mean, some mixes get
we don't have enough room
100.
to create a mixer long enough for 120 faders.
Right. So that's where the beauty of layers comes into play, and that's actually a feature that we have on our RM mixers. You can go between layers and
Okay.
navigate your mix that way.
Right.
Same thing with Studio One. So, you know, by default, you're going to see your 1 through 16 channels.
So as soon as I go into DAW mode, I'm going to see, it's going to go by default to 1 through 16. My first 16 channels are my first 16 channels in my console in Studio One.
Right.
Excellent.
If we want to go beyond that, we're going to go to our faders section here on the CS18, and we'll see 17 through 32 as
Okay.
layer B, 33 through 48 as layer C, and layer D is going to be 49 through 64.
Okay.
So hitting B, we see our 17 through 32 channels. Now, the channels by default, the layers are only going to show your channels, not your buses or your effects returns.
I see. So I'm looking over here in Studio One, and I've got, let me scroll all the way over, 80 channels in the console, of which, you know, almost 10 of those are buses, you know, and some effects returns and things like that.
So for those who don't, you know, have their buses or their effects returns all the way to the right, they have them interspersed between channels. You will not see them laid out that way because we have a different layer for your effects returns as well as for your buses, and we'll go through that later.
Okay.
So yeah, you're going to see all of your channels just by flipping through faders, layers A through D. All right. If you have more than 64 channels,
which we sometimes can, since we have an unlimited track count in Studio One.
Definitely. We're going to go to our modifiers. So hitting Shift, and then one of our fader layer buttons, A through D, will get us to 65 through 128, and then hitting modifier Control will get us beyond that.
Okay. So I probably won't ever have to go that far. But for anybody who may need to go that far, you can just hit the modifier and then cruise to the next 100 or whatever channels. So yeah, and God bless you for trying to have to mix that. We have a couple of other buttons in our fader banks. So we've got A, B, C, D are our channel banks of what's happening in the console. That's directly, I don't want to say mimicking, but it's directly reflecting what's happening in here. And it's real-time information, so whatever I do over here happens here, whatever I do over here happens in the box.
Correct.
Okay, what happens, you were saying our channels are separate from effects returns and our buses. How do we get to take a look at those things? All
right, so the effects returns layer and the bus layer are labeled as returns. So returns is going to be your effects returns, reverbs, delays, whatever you have as in effect send on the track going to return, right? All right, so you hit that, and we don't see it now because I still have my control engaged. So let's get out of that modifier, and then we'll just hit layer A.
Okay.
So that's going to be my first layer of, I'm sorry, that's back to my standard channels. But hitting return, and that's going to be my first.
So if I have a modifier engaged, if I was like way down deep in some menus, or if I was doing something with the transport, I hit effects returns, I don't see it. I just need to disengage my modifier.
Right, disengage the modifier.
So I can get to that layer. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. So now we're looking at 7 effects returns here on these faders.
Right. So it looks like we have some reverbs going on. There's an open air there, delays, other various reverbs or what have you. So you have just kind of a way to manage these mixes and the levels of your effects returns.
Okay.
All right. And then also for those who create buses, we have another layer for that. So that's going to be your mix masters.
Okay.
So you hit your mix masters button. All right.
And
that's going to bring up all of your buses.
Okay.
All right. So now you can, once you get to a point in your mix, maybe you want to just only adjust groups of
this is what we strive for when we're mixing. It's like, okay, I'm going to break this out on like 12 channels and then just mix from there overall. I typically, what I like to do, can't always do this, is get it down to 16 groups or less and then run all of my automation on those channels.
Right.
Rather than have to automate 12 different channels, route that to one thing, and then take these 4 things and route it to one thing and these 6 things and then do all of my work with this here.
Right. It's all about organization, just being able to to simplify the entire mix process, because when you're working with tons of tracks, it can get very cumbersome, very
Yes,
confusing.
of course.
So you just want to organize things, and we make it easier for you to just, be able to have hands-on control over that organization.
One page,
Right.
just one and done, and kind of make it a lot more streamlined to do the job at hand.
Right, definitely.
Now, how do I know how I do it in here, so I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. How do I actually send to my effects? I know how I see my effects returns. How does that function here?
Sure. Yeah, so from here you can control your send levels.
That's basically what I meant.
So we know in Studio One, to create a send, it's as easy as dragging and dropping a plugin to the send section
Exactly.
of your track or your channel that you want to create a send to. And so that will create the send as well as the effects return that it goes to. Right?
And insert the effect on the return. Does all the work
Correct.
for you just by dragging it
Right.
to the send.
So after that, once you've established all of that, you would want to be able to adjust the send levels here. So let's find a channel here that we're sending to some type of effects return. Let's see. I think we had some buses maybe.
That's probably going to be your best bet.
Let's see.
And
There's
your
a vocal bus.
violin maybe has something.
Let's try it, a violin.
I think it has.
All right, so this is our
reverb on
violin
it.
channel, and we want to view the send.
Okay.
So the first 1 through 8 mix buttons here on the CS18, these are right above the scribble strip. These are going to be the first 1 through 8 slots of sends.
So the send level here, we can see it has a reverb on it, right?
Right.
That's slot 1. The first thing I see,
Right. The first thing you
top
see
one would
top
be
down
slot 1.
would be slot 1.
Okay.
So we're going to hit mix 1 for slot 1 there.
Okay.
And that's going to tell us that on our selected violin bus here, you see how the faders only come alive for these 3 tracks? Well, that's indicating that there is a send right here on this track.
Okay.
And if we move this, we'll see that in Studio One, it moves accordingly. So we know that that's the send level for that.
And I have control over 8s, and I don't know why you'd have. I mean, some folks, that's
Some
fine.
folks,
I mean,
yeah,
I might have
more power to
7,
'em.
but 8, I don't know about 8. But for sure, I mean that makes it a lot easier to make a better adjustment. Like I said, I was talking to you a little earlier. You can click and move the level. You can actually, if you have one of these little mouse, you can kind of scroll on it, and it does some things. But there's nothing like grabbing the fader and then making the
definitely.
movement.
I'm a big
Specifically,
fan
if I
of
wanted to automate that, that's the way to do it. Is moving
is
the
the way.
fader.
That is the way.
For sure.
I don't really see any other way. All right, so yeah, that's how you would be able to manipulate your send levels per channel or bus, or whatever, going to your effects returns.
Okay, well, that's a lot of information on our faders. Maybe before we move from faders, should we talk about our automation? How does that work?
Automation? Okay, yeah, sure. All right, going back to our main view of our faders, what we did was took our mute group section that would normally be used with our hardware mixers, and basically we took those buttons and repurposed them for automation modes.
I like that word. Repurpose.
Yeah.
Recycle, reuse.
There you go, man.
Okay.
All right, so we have an all-on button, and basically what that does is turn all of your channels into read mode. So that turns read mode on all of your channels.
Okay.
So, if you had automation on any tracks, of course, they would be red, and you would see the automation of your faders or whatever automation you have.
Okay.
Then there's an all-off, so in case you want all of your automation off, all off.
I made some mistakes. Let me turn everything off and see where the mistakes are. I got
exactly.
you. Okay.
And then we have buttons 1 through 4. So buttons 1 through 4 are going to be per channel automation mode toggle.
Okay, so whatever, if I'm selecting on a channel and it's kick drum or whatever snare drum, and I hit 1, 2, 3, or 4, that's going to toggle through my right, read, latch, touch modes of automation.
Right. So for instance, we select our kick channel.
I'll scroll over here just so we can have a little look.
And you'll be able to view this in Studio One as well as on a channel strip. Once you hit that first button, it's going to say read. It's going to go into read automation mode. Button 2 will go into touch. Button 3 for latch, and button 4 for write.
Fantastic.
And then at that point, it's just a matter of pressing play, and you write your automation.
I like to call it performing
Perform.
the automation.
That's
'Cause
exactly
you're really,
what you're doing. Yeah,
you're really kind of doing it.
Bringing life to the mix.
Exactly.
All right. So that's the top 4 buttons. The next 4 buttons, 5 through 8, that's going to be a global. So that's all of your channels toggle, automation mode.
Okay.
So for instance, 5, it's going to be read mode for all of your channels. All right. And then 6, touch for all of your channels. So again, performing your mix, and you have more than one channel, more than one fader you want to move. And then 7 is going to be latch. And then 8 is not assign. Let's hit all off to get that off of there.
So that's like a none or turn off, or I
Right.
don't need anything reading, or like, again, I made a mistake. Hit the all off or hit 8.
Right.
That happens. Hey, if you've ever mixed a record, you know you're going to make a mistake, and you're going to want to undo something, or you're going to want to redo something. So that's definitely the way to get started on that. So that's our faders. That's all of the channels in focus in layers, effects returns, effects sends, group masters. There was something I was thinking of as we were talking. Our transport we went over, but there was something that was interesting with transport we didn't actually quite cover, was markers and navigating with the transport in our timeline of the arrange window. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, markers. So on the CS18, we have a marker button that's going to be just below the touchscreen.
Okay.
Once you engage that, it takes you into the marker menu.
So I see a bunch of markers right here.
Right, you see your list of markers. You also see a plus and a minus button. So that gives you the option of adding or removing a marker.
Okay.
And just to show you, we're going to play back this mix. And I'm going to just tap on some of these markers just to navigate to them. So I think we're at marker 5 right now. So I'm going to go to start. I'm tapping it. It takes us to start instantly. We have 3, 4, and then back to our marker 5, Spanish orchestra.
Yeah. So sometimes when I'm typing, I got the big hands and I miss letters. So specifically, this is, I think, what was this? That's a verse. And let me go ahead and write that in there. So I can change it here, right?
Right, you can change it.
And then I'm going to see verse there. So like we were saying, real time. Whatever I'm doing over here, whatever you're doing over there, these two guys are communicating over the network.
In sync.
Okay.
In sync.
And then we can, just like you were doing with your modifier keys, you can actually go previous and next with your return to 0 and stop button.
Right.
By putting the control modifier. So you can cruise through your markers, or you can just open the master, hit markers in master control, and then just select where you want to cruise to. And that would be for navigating to do some editing, or play back a specific part for the artist, or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
You also have the option in the same menu to tap jog.
Okay.
And now this encoder right below the touchscreen becomes a jog wheel.
To look for finer adjustments to kind of get in between the markers and just cruise around that way. That's cool. So let me ask you, if I'm playing, can I jog while I'm playing, or would I just jog and then, hit play?
No, you can jog while you play.
I like the sound of being able to do stuff like that. Oh, yes. So you basically use jog to do a remix of the track.
Real time.
Okay, so that's cool. That's markers, transport, our faders, layers, effects returns. We've talked about quite a bit of things.
Yes.
There's one of my favorite things about the CS18 and using it to control Studio One is messing with plugins. Specifically, dynamics plugins, compressors, EQs, and things like that. Can you walk us through how that functions on CS18?
Right, definitely. I'm a big fan of being able to control as much as I can with a physical thing,
like
versus,
a knob or a fader,
versus mousing around or hitting your keyboard.
Right.
So on the CS18, what you would want to do, let's go back to home in the menu. Let's find a track that
I don't know what a good track to tell you would be. Hey, this has definitely got something. Usually drums have some dynamics on them, so maybe a group master or something, or like a bus,
let's go to one of our bus.
So your drums probably has something on it.
All right, let's select drums. All right, so drums is selected.
Okay.
And then on our touchscreen up here, we're going to hit Effects, Insert, Sends. All right. So
There's
that's
a couple.
Yeah.
I nailed it, dude. There are two.
two.
You're welcome.
Dos. So that's going to tell us that we're on our drums bus here, and then we have the option of choosing inserts or sends. There are no sends on this particular channel, so
Okay.
we wouldn't see them anyway if we selected them. But right now in default mode, we're seeing our compressor in slot 1 and the VT700 in slot 2.
That's one of our new effects from the channel strip plugin.
Right, it's an emulation of the ADL 700.
Right,
Yep.
it's fantastic.
It sounds great. I use it on everything.
Okay, so I want to control this plugin. What do I have to do?
All right, so to control the plugin, you just simply select it in the list.
Ooh.
It highlights on the CS18. It also brings up the GUI on Studio One, so that's
Okay.
pretty good. So you'll get a visual representation of it there.
So I can see all of the mistakes that I'm making in real time while I'm touching buttons in here.
Right.
I
Very
mean
good
me,
for pro.
not the folks out there. I'm talking about me specifically.
Yeah, it's good for those who use Pro EQ and want to see the analyzer
Okay.
as they're making adjustments
Okay.
to their EQ as well. So what happens on the CS18 is that now your 16 encoders at the top are now control link mapped to this plugin
Okay.
by default. So
Okay.
all PreSonus plugins will already be control linked for the CS18. So
How do I know what encoder does what?
sure. So you'll get that information via the 16 channel strips below. On the
Uh-huh.
bottom portion of the channel strip, you'll
Okay.
see names for each parameter of that plugin. So we have trim for encoder 1, high pass filter for encoder 2,
Okay.
low frequency, so on and so on
Okay.
for each encoder.
Okay, so if I want to grab the trim on the front end, because this is a model of a preamp compressor EQ,
Right.
I grab that this encoder here, and I'm going to pretend like I'm doing stuff, and I'm actually doing stuff. I'm so excited that I'm even involved right now. And so it's whatever I'm
Right, it's
happening
a direct
here,
correlation
bam,
from
it's
what you're
doing
doing
that.
on here to what's going on in the plugin on screen.
which is way better any day of the week than
Than mouse.
doing that.
Right, definitely.
The worst. The worst.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's definitely the way. So I have control over that. Now, the VT700 is native to Studio One.
Right.
What happens when I have something that's not native to Studio One, like Waves plugins or Native Instruments plugins, whatever the third-party plugin would be, flavor of the week?
Right. Right.
What do I do? What would I do then? Does that
All right.
automatically happen, or do I have to do something?
No, it won't automatically happen. What'll happen is, however you would do it via control link. So you can control link any plugin that you have
Sure.
in Studio One and be able to use any hardware controller. It works the same way with the CS18. The CS18 is just a hardware controller, right?
Let me recap that really quickly,
Sure.
because I just got like 1,000 ideas all at once. So not only can I say I have, and we were doing this before, I have a Rob Pappen reverb and delay. I can control link those parameters, but I could control link an instrument
Yes.
to these encoders?
Yes.
Okay, so if I wanted to do weird sweeps in a synthesizer, I
Right.
could like throw that on an encoder there.
Definitely.
Just by, I'll tell you what, you got to show me how to do it.
All right.
I have to see this in
So
real life.
let's find a plugin.
Yeah,
in
let's
our
check out
mix.
that sweet reverb that we were talking about.
All right, so let's go to our returns, and let's see.
I think the violin verb, bio. I have terrible track naming schemes, by the way. They make total sense to me, but now that we're kind of messing with this, I'm like, man, I'm really sorry, Dominic. I could have been more forthcoming with information.
So we select that track, our violin verb, and hitting the effects in the touchscreen, that gives us our list of inserts. We see the RP verb 2.
The effects return is showing our reverb. RP verb 2 is inserted into that return, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So,
So we tap that to
okay.
select it,
That
and we
is-
see the GUI on screen in Studio One. And now all that's left to do is to control link it.
Okay, so I want to go and pick a parameter such as volume, which is an easy parameter to choose, right? So I have that.
Right.
Actually,
Let's
we
do
already
another
have
one,
that
'cause we
linked.
did that one
Okay,
already.
let's say space size.
All right, space size is good.
And then
All right,
what do
so
we do?
to control link, yeah, you select the parameter in the plugin GUI. And then on CS18, you would just move the knob you want to assign it to.
Okay.
And then you click the assign button
Here.
in the GUI, and that's it. Now I can move the encoder
Ta-da!
on CS18, and it moves the parameter in the plugin. Very easy.
And I mean, obviously, we could map out every one of these things, but specifically, we do it like a wet dry, maybe a space size, maybe a pre-delay,
Right.
and then we're kind of the plugin is mapped. And once we've done it, what happens?
Once you've done it, it's mapped for any song that you want to open
Okay.
that plugin up on, and CS18 will show you the parameter for that's mapped for each encoder, just as it would with the normal PreSonus plugins.
And again, not just for a time-based effect or a third-party plugin, we could use this for an instrument as well. If like we
Right.
want to do something with the synth or something with a piano or the drum machine, whatever we wanted to mess with, we can just control link these parameters to these encoders.
Correct.
That's
correct.
fantastic.
It's awesome.
So I know we've covered some things, but I think there's a couple other tips and tricks that we may not have. Maybe even a third layer of like top secret stuff that we can show the audience out there.
One thing I know I use a lot that we probably should cover is the ability to actually record arm your tracks.
Well, every now and then you're going to have to record some more stuff.
You will.
That's going to
And
happen.
to not have to touch your mouse and keyboard to do that is good by me.
Okay.
So what you want to do is basically select the track that you want to record. Let's see, for instance, maybe it's this bass.
Excellent.
So we select bass, and what you want to do is hit your modifier option,
Okay.
and then go ahead and select any track that you want to record.
Okay.
on. So it could be bass, it could be this classy track, it could be violin 1.
And I'm
So
just
you
going
could
to pop
select
over here so
multiple
we can
ones.
see.
Let's see. I think
I
it's
see it
the
arming
mixer
here.
mode that you're in
Yeah.
is not showing.
Oh, that's right. That's correct. I've got it in.
There we go.
What I call thin track mode.
Thin track mode. Yeah.
Fit track mode.
So as you can see,
Right.
as I toggle the
Okay.
record arm for those tracks, it shows in Studio One as well.
Okay.
All right. So it's a good way to be able to
Just
record on a
another
bunch
way
of
to get your
tracks.
hands
Yeah.
off of the keyboard and the mouse and onto the control surface. So you're able to do a bunch of things, like many
Yes.
things using the control surface itself. I think there was a cool trick you showed me earlier that I wanted to share with everybody, or wanted to have you share with everyone, was
Okay.
using the Flex Master.
Yeah, the Flex Master. So on our physical mixers, like the RM, we use the Flex Master there, but on the software side in Studio One, we can also use it to be able to assign it to any channel fader in our mix. This could be a channel fader, a bus,
Okay.
effects return, whatever we want. And what this will allow us to do is assign it to that fader and go elsewhere in our mix and still have kind of a access to that fader without having to flip flop.
So if there was a
around.
fader on like the layer D and I
Right.
want to mix on layer A,
Correct.
I could grab that fader and bring it up to the Flex fader and have everybody on one surface.
Right.
Okay, give me a for instance. I think we have, let's say I wanted my drum bus. I wanted to control my
Okay.
drum bus on my Flex fader, and then I wanted to mess with my piano, or I wanted to mess with horns or whatever. How would I go about doing that?
Sure. So first you want to go to the channel you want to assign to the Flex Master in your
Okay.
mix. So in this case, it's going to be our drum bus.
Okay.
So we go to Mix Masters.
Okay.
All right. We find our drum bus. That's this third channel here. We select it. Once we select it on CS18, you find the Assign section and you hit the Edit button.
Okay.
Now you notice once I hit the Edit button, if you watch the Flex fader, it actually pops up.
Okay.
And it's going to pop up, the fader's going to pop up to the same level as whatever your drum bus is.
Okay. Right.
So now these two faders are linked. So if you move one, it moves the other.
Okay.
So
Okay.
now I can go elsewhere in my mix, and this Flex fader, Flex Master will be assigned to that drum bus.
Okay. So if I was in layer 1 through 16 and I wanted to, I don't know, maybe just listen to the congas, or
Oh,
there you go,
so-
that's fine. We could listen to, I don't know, the guitar. and I'm assuming since this is my master, I can
Right.
solo that as well,
Yes.
and then play back. I'm
right.
gonna not touch the keyboard and just play back. Okay, so I hear my drums. I hear the drums and I hear the classic, or it's not classic. I hear the acoustic guitar and I hear the drums. So if I wanted to turn the drums up, or if I wanted to turn them down, that makes sense. If specifically, I think we were discussing earlier, is if we had some clashing frequency-wise going on with drum cymbals or something like that with another group of instruments, we could go to that layer and then bring the drum bus up on the Flex Master and then kind of just adjust it without having to go make an adjustment, go to the other layer, make an adjustment, go back to the other layer, make an adjustment. We can just do it all in one single layer.
Right. Just making it easier for you to navigate.
Way easier.
Way easier.
So is there anything else that we need to kind of cover? I tell you, I'm pretty sure that we're creating many questions out there in internet land.
That's
a lot. That's a lot of stuff we covered. I tell you what, we're gonna go. We're gonna take a little quick break, and we're gonna go to another video. And when we come back, we'll take some questions on the CS18. I'm sure you have many, so go ahead and throw them in the chat, text, email, use the internet as any way you can to get us those questions, and we'll do the best that we can to make something intelligent up. We'll be right back. Okay, we're going to take some questions. Dominic, we got some that came in over the wire.
all right.
Some through the air. First question is, they're asking about third-party plugin control, or is it only native to Studio 1.3?
No, definitely you can use third-party plugins. That's going to be through the control link functionality of the CS18. So, you know, when you select your plugin on the effects sends, then all of the controls are now control linkable, and then you do that through Studio One through your normal control link workflow.
Already mapped to the native plugins, you would just control link any third-party stuff.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. So next question. Is it possible to use transport buttons to jump to next or previous arranger sections?
Right now, it's set so that you can go to next marker, previous marker.
Right.
However, there are additional buttons that you can control link globally to the next arrangement section or previous arrangement section, or really any Studio One command.
Okay. So which buttons would be programmable to do different commands?
Those are going to be the ones
the
in
encoders,
the encoders and also the other fat channel buttons. There.
Okay. Okay, cool. Excellent. I have a question. Does this work with Studio One 2?
Good question. No, it does not. We built that functionality in Studio One 3, much like we did with the Studio One remote.
Okay.
So, you know, that we didn't retrofit it for Studio One 2 or anything like that.
Okay. So Studio One 3, definitely everything's mapped for native plugins, and also can use third-party plugins as well. How do I arm the automation on the board, which is the CS18, the control surface, because right now I have to still use the mouse to turn on the automation for that channel. So I'm assuming the question is, I want to write automation on a specific channel. How do I arm that? Can you just walk us through, just I guess pick any channel, can you walk us through how we would turn on, I guess, write automation so we could you know, not have to use the mouse or the keyboard to get to that step?
Right. So you would just go to your channel that you want to automate. Let me pick a singular channel. Here's the hats.
Single, yeah.
Of course. And then in your
I
mute
love
group
to automate
section.
my hats.
Yeah.
Just up and down, and up and down, left and right, left and right, left and right.
So in the mute group section, like I said, we reassign those in DAW mode to be the different write modes.
I'll tell you what, let me pull it up here so we can also see when you're messing with it. You said you were going to mess with the hat, correct? And I'll zoom in on that here in the computer screen so we can see. So if you're selected on channel.
All right, so on the hat channel, you would want to, again, in the mute group section, these are reassigned in DAW mode for your write modes, read, touch, latch, write.
Okay.
So with your channel selected, you just hit right,
Okay.
which would be 4.
And
it goes
we
into
go
right
into
mode.
right mode. Okay.
All right, then you press play, do
You
your
play and then
automation,
do whatever you
blah, blah,
want.
blah.
Okay.
And then, of course, with the channel selected, hit 1 again to go into read
Goes
mode.
back into read. Okay.
So, yeah,
cool.
you never have to touch your mouse to be able to do automation.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Which is great because once you've kind of got your workflow, you've
Right.
got 2 hands over here. You don't want to have one here and one here. You want to be able to just kind of
Right.
roll with both hands on the control surface. Next question. Is the CS18AI standalone with Studio 1.3? Do I have to buy an RM or do I have to have an AI console to work with this?
No, you do not.
Excellent. So ultimately it does have some capabilities on board with it, so I can get audio in and out. I can use it as an interface?
Through ABB.
Okay.
So, but that would be, partner with the RM stuff.
Okay, sure.
Where we have ABB implemented.
But I don't need a piece of hardware just to use this as a control surface for Studio 1.3.
That's correct.
Okay, so I can, like we have it hooked up, and I think we discussed this earlier, we have it hooked up through a router switch, like an access point that you would have for your internet access at home.
Right.
So if we have that and we have a computer, we just hook all that up with our Ethernet cable and we're golden.
We're golden.
Excellent. Okay, so next question. This is a good one. You're a married man. Wondering how to explain to my wife that she won't be having any presents on her 50th birthday on July 14th. I think Andy may have answered this before. Tell her that you're saving up for her 51st birthday.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, because I mean, you really need to do something for you, sir. This is a good thing to do. Get a CS18 to control Studio One. Can you stack 2 RM32 mixers? And that is not right now question. Or the answer is not at this moment. I think that what they're asking is the control surface has 4 layers for 64 input. But we have 32s and we have 16s. How does that function? And we're looking into cascading in the future so you can actually have the 2
That's correct.
32 RMs.
That's correct.
So you can get the inputs there. Next question. Can we control plug-in parameters on this thing? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
And we kind of walked through that. But let's maybe take a look at a channel. You're on the hat. I believe that there is an effect plug-in. So
Okay.
what do I do right now if I want to open up the plug-in? Do I need to go here?
No, don't have to touch your
Don't need
mouse
to
or
touch,
keyboard.
okay, go.
Choose the channel that you want.
Uh-huh.
In this case, it's hat. Then we want to go to the touch screen and hit Effects, Insert Sends.
Okay.
And that would show us any inserts that are on that channel.
Oh,
so
I'm
I don't
sorry.
see
It
any
doesn't
there.
have one. You know, the very next channel has one. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's go to Congas, and then we'll hit Effects, Insert Sends.
I'm lying to you. It's
Let's see.
it's the bus it's the master, it's the group master that I'm looking at.
All right, so let's go
it's
to
gonna
our
be in the
group
mix right there.
masters.
And it is kicks is what is in
Kicks.
focus right here.
Let's hit
Okay.
Kicks, and then Effects, Insert Sends.
I feel like I set you
Awesome.
up. I really didn't set you up, Dominic. I was looking at it. It was right next to that. And I wasn't paying attention.
There
I
you go.
apologize. So I now see that I have the ADL700 plug-in available. So we can pop that up.
Which is actually the VT1 now.
Right. This is a
early
pre-thing.
build.
We tend to have some secret stuff here in the studio over at PreSonus.
So yeah, once you see your inserts, you want to go ahead and select it, and that'll
it
throw
is
up the
populated.
GUI on your screen, and then also it'll put the CS18 into plug-in focus mode.
Okay.
Okay, so now all of your encoders at the top, as well as buttons, are assigned to parameters in that particular plugin.
And it says it right here in the scribble strip as
Right.
well. So this is the scribble strip is corresponding to this encoder, and it tells you trim, frequency adjustments here. This is threshold ratio, attack release, so on and so
Exactly.
forth. So it's telling you it's just mapped it out already for you.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Let's see more stuff. Oh, could you show us Vegas mode? We actually did, but can you show it to us again?
We did. Let's see if it'll go into it again. 'Cause
Okay, cool. So there's flashing lights and movement and all kinds of stuff happening.
yeah.
Next question. When you control the RM32, you can group drums on one channel by using the group mix button.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do the same thing in Studio One, I think is the question.
Yeah, it works just like in Studio One when you group a group of tracks, when you group them together, or you select group them together. Any one fader within that group will move all of the faders in relationship to each other.
Okay.
So that's kind of the same workflow.
Here's another good question. Does the CS18 work with other DAWs like, I'm not going to mention, I'm just thinking like Pro Tools or Logic or the other? Yeah.
So not at this moment.
Okay.
This is 1.0 implementation. Okay. So of course we're going to be building on an implementation of that, adding new features, adding more compatibility with other software.
But it's not never, it's just not now.
That's correct.
Okay, cool. So we're looking into that for sure. Let's see. What other features for Studio One will be implemented in the CS18AI? So I guess we've kind of gone over, I think 90-something% of what it does.
Sure.
I guess we're not really at liberty to speculate what is going to happen because really the sky's the limit. And
right. Exactly.
As much as we'd like to take credit for it, we don't actually get to put it under the hood, right? So we can come up with an idea and say, hey, could you do this?
Right, definitely.
Right. So
yeah, we're definitely looking at new features to implement with CS18 because I would like to never have to touch my mouse again.
Yeah,
and just have a true studio workflow.
I would like to have an implant in my brain so I can just think it and it just happens.
That'd be awesome.
It's because I would sit on the couch instead of sitting in the chair, or I'd lay down and do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just something we're looking into developing this technology as well. We make firmware where one doesn't need a wireless router to connect if you're using a network switch. Okay, you don't need a wireless router to connect if you go point to point. So there's a couple of things that we would talk about network-wise. If you're connecting to the hardware, you can go point to point. If you're going to a rack mixer with the CS18, you can go point to point and have full functionality.
Right.
If you want to add anything else into the mix, you're going to need to have some sort of router so it can tell everybody on the network who's who and they can all talk to each other. If you want to pass audio over that network, you'd need to add an AVB switch to do that.
That's correct. That's correct.
So I hope that helped and didn't hurt or make it more confusing. We're actually coming out with several videos that cover that topic because networking can be, I don't know anything about networking. Everything I know is because what I've had to know about PreSonus products. And we have some very talented and smart people here in QA and in IT who've kind of been helping me along. But it can be a very convoluted thing.
Right, definitely.
We just want to get in and mix audio. We want to make things sound better and louder.
Musicians, we just
so let me open this back up. I lost it. It locked me out. Okay, so how many channels simultaneously at 192? That's a good question.
Okay. Well, this is a control surface, so it really doesn't matter. It doesn't care about the sample rate.
Right. So yeah, we're controlling with that. So if you were using a StudioLive console and is your interface in the studio like we are, that's up to 96K. Or if you were using a rack mixer as your interface, it'd be 96K. Now the Studio 192.
Right. Studio 192 will do 192 kilohertz.
Okay.
And really, it's as much as your computer can handle.
Sure. Okay. So track-wise, track count-wise, sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit.
Love it. Sky's the limit. Next thing, will we be able to add plugins to tracks from the CS18 in the future? That's a pretty cool question.
That would be, I would love to
we're
have
behind that request 100%.
Definitely.
We will definitely put it in the feature request list. That would be crazy. That'd be great. Let's see. Can I set up an RM on stage running to an AVB switch at front of house with an Ethernet cable sending audio to the computer at front of house and another Ethernet running to the CS18AI? That was a lot. I didn't track that in my brain, I don't think. I think what the question is, can I have an RM, can I have the CS18, can I have a computer, and can I have audio running over all of these things? And I think what the setup would be, what I would do is I would have in my system, I'd have the CS18 in front of house, I'd have the computer FireWire to my RM, so like I could use it for backing tracks, and then have everyone hardwired to an AVB switch and have a router in there as well. And then that way I can control my RM with the CS18.
Correct.
And I could also use transport to actually play back tracks, and then I could go into DAW mode and change the mix if I needed to on the fly.
Correct.
in live performance. You'd agree with that?
I would agree with that. A lot of flexibility there to switch between live mixer workflow as well as DAW function workflow.
Yeah, that's something we really didn't mention much in this webcast, and we have other videos on, is that it is an amazing Studio One controller, but it is a hardware controller for a rack mixer. Right. And you can do both simultaneously, which is even cooler. So, yes. I mean, that's some pretty, gangster stuff right there, to be able to handle backing track mixing, backing track playback, and running front of house simultaneously. Let's see, one more. Can you use the CS18 with the StudioLive AI mixer? Yes, depending on how you're using it. If you're using the StudioLive like we do in the studio as an interface and a comms section for the studio, yes. If it doesn't, however, it's not controlling this unit. It would control, we use it to control Studio One. So it's not gonna, I guess the question is, can I control this with this? And that's a no. You would control an RM, you can control Studio One, but you can't control the console mixer. You can use a console mixer as an interface. Like, that's what we do in the studio specifically. This is our monitoring, and it's how we set up our headphone mixes in the studio. It's the interface to the computer, and then we use the CS18 for our control surface to in the mix stage, and sometimes during the tracking as transport and stuff like that on the CS18.
Yes.
I'm sure that you guys have a lot more questions about many more things. You can always hit us up at education@PreSonus.com. There are tons of resources at PreSonus.com. Before we split, and you can help me try and remember all of this. Okay. We have a bunch more stuff coming up here at PreSonus. Specifically, Monday and Tuesday we have Loop Loft in. We have Charlie Hunters coming in with Johnny Vodakovich and Simon Lott, two amazing New Orleans drummers. And we're going to just be in the studio recording and making, amazing loops that will be available in just, hopefully a few months after that. So you guys can have some sick loops to start creating new tracks with. But we're going to kind of be behind the scenes and show how we mic things up. We're going to show how we set up the amplifiers. We're going to show pretty much everything. We're going to have cameras everywhere. The camera guys are super excited about it. And then after that, on October 8th, our very next PreSonus Live, we had Nothing More in the studio, and they're doing the live performance thing, and they're talking about using plugins live, and it's really cool and very informative, because a lot of people are trying to get into doing that, but it can be kind of cumbersome if you don't know what you're doing. So definitely tune in Monday, Tuesday, next week. It's 2 to 4, both days, with Loop Loft, and then it's going to be 2 p.m. on October 8th. We'll be rocking out with Nothing More here in the studio. Thanks, Dominic, for everything that you did for this, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next time. That is PreSonus Live.